Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're looking at the Logitech G213 Prodigy gaming keyboard. Now the first gaming keyboard I ever owned was actually from Logitech, the G510 back in the day. I've actually got videos on it if you want to check it out on the channel. So needless to say, I am very eager to test another Logitech keyboard. This one comes in at $59.99 at the current point of recording, which is pretty good for that. We're going to obviously cover my thoughts about it in the end, conclusion. But this is a slim body design that uses mech dome switches, so we're not looking at a mechanical keyboard, although they do have mechanical ones in their range. This is a membrane style, just like the G510 I looked at what feels like a lifetime ago now. Now this has RGB support with customizable zones with 16.8 million colours. There is a palm rest built into this, but it isn't removable. I'll cover that in a minute. Now they claim that their mech dome switches have anti-ghosting that's 4 times faster than standard keyboards. You have got dedicated media controls, which is nice to see. There is a 5-key rollover on there, and it is spill resistant as well, which is one thing you generally don't see on gaming keyboards. So should you happen to spill your drink over it, you should be all good. Now the only thing in the box is some instructions, but let's be fair, you're not going to need those. So here's the keyboard itself. I have used this for a little while, so that's why it does look a little bit greasy. That's not obviously how it looks straight out of the box. My immediate thought with this keyboard was the width, purely because that wrist rest isn't removable. You do need to consider that when you're looking at it for your desk. I've got a 60cm depth on my desk, so I really don't have much room once I've got the monitor base. So that's definitely one thing that is a downside to this. If you've got a bigger desk, then obviously go for it, but it does take up quite a bit of room if you're on a smaller one like mine. In terms of it being a plastic wrist rest, I'm not really seeing it to have any negative effect on my wrists after time, so even though it is plastic, it seems to do the job just fine. Now the cable is hardwired to the keyboard, so no removable one here. But that being said, the cable is very thick and the braid is very tight, so I can't see it degrading over time. And the whole cable is 2 meters in length, which seems like an adequate amount of cable for most users. On the back we've got some nice thick rubber pads at the bottom. You'll also find the same rubber on the stands as well if you do want to elevate it. With those clips down, you also got rubber as well to protect your desk. Here are the 2 different height options. A slight increment with the stands down, but then quite a significant raise when you put them up. Personally for me, I had it raised on the duration of my testing. I did find it a little bit uncomfortable with it down flat. In the top left you've got the Logitech G logo. Also features the RGB as you can see. I think it's a nice little touch, breaks it out from what we generally see. On the opposite end we've got our media controls, mute, volume up and down, play, stop, and previous and next track. Now disregarding the fact that obviously you can feel for the square to stop your music easier than finding a round button, I think it would look a lot better if it was just round like the rest, just make it a lot cleaner looking and it won't look mismatched. Now to the left of the media controls we've got a button that disables all the illuminations on the keyboard, which you might like to use during the day and then maybe you want your RGB on at night, or maybe you want to disable the illumination when you're watching a movie, something like that. You've got the option to do so. And then to the left of that you've got the button that disables the Windows key. Now for example, you're online playing Battlefield, you press that button by accident, you get your window minimized and then you get shot and killed. Obviously with that button this won't happen, so it's really quite a cool feature. Now these buttons are hard plastic, unlike the soft touch ones that you'll find on the other keyboards in this range. Now considering it's a membrane keyboard, this actually sounds pretty good. Take a listen. Now I don't know about you, but that's personally one of the better sounding keyboards that I've heard, being a membrane keyboard as well. You can definitely speed type on this as well. It does take a little bit of adjustment for going from a mechanical back to a membrane. I certainly found myself doing emails a lot quicker as well, that's for sure. So a little look under at the membrane keys. I don't recommend you take them off, they're pretty difficult to get off actually. Certainly not as easy as the mechanical ones, but they're not designed to be taken off, so that's kind of why. Obviously the colour comes straight through the rubber to give you the RGB. As you can see where the key switch is slightly raised, that's where you get that slight spill resistance as well, because the water will go below that and obviously it would have to go up and over that key switch to actually get into the key. Okay, so onto the software. It's not quite as advanced as some other pieces of software we've seen from mechanical RGB keyboards, but you still have got a lot you can do, so let's take a little look at what's available. So first up, you can program all of the F keys to remap them to whatever you fancy. Literally any function you can do on a mouse or a keyboard, you can program to one key, which is really cool. It's good as well because some people may be doubtful if this is going to be perfect for them because there's no macro keys, but once you have the ability to remap them, obviously there's no worry to that anymore. Now you can also add profiles as well, so obviously when you go into different games it will switch to different sets of macros. So there's an example of me adding one in manually, or you can literally go for the easy option and just scan for all your games. Obviously not every game is on there because that would take them forever to do every single game with a profile, but the majority of games that I've got I did find on the list. So as you can see here, we've got a different set of commands for each game, so some have been preset, which is nice. Obviously you can go in and delete or edit them if you wish. So moving on to the lighting, the first method we've got is going through the different zones. So you've got 5 options available. You can just click a colour and then click on the keyboard to change it. So you can have 5 different sections that light up different colours. If you're wondering, I will show you this on the keyboard in a minute as well. Then you've got your different effects. So the first one is a fixed colour. The next one's a breathing effect, so obviously fading in and out. You can change the speed of that if you wish as well. Personally, I like to go for kind of a mid-speed. I think the first one's just too slow, and then the fast one's just distracting, so I think the middle's a nice ground. The colour cycle obviously cycles through all the available colours. Again, middle ground's quite nice. It's just too much when you do it on full speed. And then colour wave left to right or right to left. Personally for me, I like a slower effect on that one. Next up, we've got the options to change what the joystick button at the top does. So you can have it to disable just the Windows keys, or maybe you wanted to add in some Alt or Control. So it's nice to have a bit of a selection on what you can do. You can see there I'm clicking a few extra keys if you wanted to add those in. Maybe you've got macros for some other button that you don't want to be pressed during the game. Now this is quite cool. This is the heat map, which shows you where you press the most on the keyboard. You could start this at the start of one of your games, for example, and let it run throughout. Then at the end it will show you exactly where you've been pressing during that game. It's quite cool. I don't think it's something you're going to really use that often. If you just play one kind of game, then you know where you're going to be pressing. You know, it's quite simple. But yeah, just something a little bit fun to play about with. So it goes without saying, you're buying an RGB keyboard, you're going to want to see what it looks like when it actually does the RGB effects. So first of all, just a steady colour. So this is lighting up the 5 zones as I mentioned before. It's not the brightest keyboard, that's one thing I do want to stress. It's not, you know, the most in your face like other ones that are available. But I think that is quite good in a way. Sometimes you can have keyboards that are too bright and they just get really distracting really, just over the function they're designed for. So this is quite a nice subtle lighting rather than an overly in your face one. So this is the breathing effect. Then that's the full speed. I think you'll agree it's just a little bit too much. Colour shift, obviously going through the colours. Now that's the middle ground for colour switch, I think is just about right. And this is the colour wave, slow and then full speed. And then a nice middle ground, which is how I've had mine set when I've been testing it. Now it does struggle with white a little bit. That's one thing I always look at on RGB keyboards. It's a difficult colour for RGB LEDs to produce. And the white on this is a little bit yellow. So I've shown you pretty much all I can with the keyboard and its features. Now let's give you my conclusion. So first of all, I want to cover the keys themselves. Now on the website they say they've got the same feel as the cherry brown switches, and I think that's accurate to a point, because you've got the membrane underneath that does make it rather mushy when you bottom them out. If you've used cherry browns before, you know when you bottom them out you get a nice solid thump when you hit the deck. Obviously you're not going to get that same feel when you use this being the rubber underneath. Now if you compare it to something like cherry reds, you won't get the actuation that you can get with those either. If you're playing a game that requires really fast reflexes, this may not be the perfect keyboard for you. Now as I mentioned in previous keyboard reviews, Battlefield's always the one game that I play the most, and with the G213 I did struggle a little bit. Now coming from my custom Cherry MX brown keyboard, this did take me a while to adjust. If I had to put it on this keyboard, could I get on with it? Of course I could. It does just take you time to get used to it. Now this comes in at $59.99 in the UK or $69.99 in the US, and this is kind of the price when you're starting to get the cheaper mechanical keyboards, be it not Cherry MX switches but a cheaper counterpart. Now that kind of brings in, is it worth that being a membrane keyboard to what you could potentially buy? Now the cheaper mechanical, you're unlikely to get RGB, which on the G213 I think is done very well. Now unlike the other ones in the range, you don't get individually lit keys, but it does provide some nice visual effects. Now if you spend an extra £10 you can get the G610, which is a white backlit keyboard but it also has the Cherry MX browns. So if you want to stick with Logitech but you do want a mechanical version, then that is available. The lack of USB pass-through may be a put-off for some people, but personally for me it makes no difference. Then the only little niggle I've got is the stop key on the media controls. Personally I like them to all be the same. So overall I think it's a pretty good keyboard, but be it a little bit expensive, especially considering the mechanical offerings you can get at a similar price point. But I am keen to look at the G810 from Logitech, which is their top end model, which has the full RGB that we've seen on this one, individual key backlighting, and the G-Roma switches, which is something I've not used before. So if you'd like me to take a look at that, then please do let me know and I'll see what I can do. If you've got any questions, as always, leave them down in the comments box below and I will get back to you. There may be something you want me to cover that I haven't. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Big thanks to Logitech for sending this out for me to review. Thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next video.